The Valkyrie exploration vessel drifted through the cold silence of uncharted space, its sensors reaching out like invisible fingers into the void. Commander Una 3 stood at the center of the bridge, her silver-scaled skin reflecting the soft blue light of the display screens that surrounded her station. For 300 cycles, the serenity of distant shores had traveled beyond the borders of known civilization, cataloging dead worlds and empty systems that held nothing but dust and ancient stone. This mission was supposed to be routine. "Commander," Communications Officer Jinho called out, his voice carrying an unusual tremor. "I am detecting structured electromagnetic emissions from the system ahead." Una 3 turned her attention to the young officer. Noting how his four-fingered hands moved rapidly across his console, Jinho was barely out of the academy, but he had proven himself capable during the long voyage. His specialty was decoding primitive transmissions from pre-spaceflight civilizations, a skill that rarely found use in the empty sectors they had been assigned to explore. "Show me." Una 3 commanded. The main display shifted to reveal a small yellow star surrounded by 8 planetary bodies. The third planet from the star glowed with swirls of blue and green and white, unmistakably alive, but it was the cascade of signals emanating from that world that made Una 3's breath catch in her throat. Thousands upon thousands of transmissions filled every frequency band, overlapping and interweaving in patterns that spoke of a civilization not merely existing but thriving. "How did our long-range surveys miss this?" asked Science Officer Mira, her voice sharp with disbelief. Una 3 had no answer. The galactic surveys had marked this system as unremarkable. A yellow dwarf star with no planets worth investigating. Either the surveys were wrong, or this civilization had risen to prominence with impossible speed. "Officer Jinho," Una 3 said, keeping her voice steady despite the racing of her twin hearts. "Can you isolate any coherent transmissions?" Jinho's hands danced across his controls, filtering through the chaos of signals. Minutes passed as he worked, his concentration absolute. The rest of the bridge crew watched in tense silence, knowing they might be witnessing history. "I have isolated several distinct transmission types," Jinho finally reported. "There are entertainment broadcasts, what appear to be news communications, mathematical data streams, and navigation signals." He paused, his dark eyes meeting the commander's gaze. One phrase appears repeatedly across multiple frequencies and transmission types. "What phrase?" "Earth control." The words hung in the recycled air of the bridge. Una 3 rolled the foreign sounds across her tongue, trying to understand their meaning. Earth, presumably the name of the third planet. Control, a word that suggested authority. Management, perhaps coordination. "They have a unified planetary communication system," Myra observed, wonder creeping into her scientific detachment. "That level of coordination is remarkable for a species that has not yet achieved faster than light travel." Una 3 made her decision. "Prepare a first contact transmission," she ordered. "Standard protocol mathematical primes followed by our universal greeting sequence." The crew moved with practiced efficiency. First contact protocols had been drilled into every member of the Valkyrie exploration course, though few ever had the opportunity to use them. The mathematical sequence would establish that the transmission was artificial and intelligent in origin. The universal greeting would offer peaceful intentions in the most basic symbolic language. The Valkyrie scientists had been able to devise transmission away, Jinho confirmed, and then they waited hours stretched into what felt like eternities. Una 3 ordered the crew to rotate through rest cycles, but few could actually sleep. The bridge remained fully staffed as officers found excuses to linger at their stations. 12 hours past 16 at the 17th hour. Jinho suddenly straightened in his seat. "Commander," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "we are receiving a response. On main display, the screen filled with text, not mathematical symbols, not primitive pictographs, but perfectly rendered Velthari script. Una 3 read the words once, then again, unable to believe what she was seeing. Earth Control acknowledges your transmission and welcomes you to the Sol system. Please state your intentions and current vessel status. Standby for traffic coordination and approach. Vector assignment frequency monitored continuously. Response time approximately 30 seconds. The bridge erupted in confused murmurs. Mira was the first to voice what everyone was thinking. They decoded our entire linguistic structure, she said, her voice hollow with shock. They received our transmission and completely decoded our language in 17 hours. That is not possible, another officer argued. It took our ancestors generations to develop translation matrices for the first alien languages we encountered, but the evidence glowed on the screen before them, undeniable in its clarity. Una 3 felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature controls. She had expected to find a primitive species, perhaps one just beginning to reach toward the stars. Instead, she had found something far more unsettling, a civilization that had been quietly listening to the galaxy and learning. Respond to their transmission, Una 3 ordered, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. Identify us as the Velthari exploration vessel, Serenity of Distant Shores, on a mission of peaceful discovery and scientific exchange. Jinho composed and sent the message. The response came in exactly 30 seconds. Just as promised, Velthari vessel, Serenity of Distant Shores. Earth Control confirms peaceful intent. You are cleared for approach to Earth orbit transmitting navigation. Coordinates and recommended flight path. Please maintain designated corridor to avoid collision with orbital infrastructure. A liaison team will rendezvous with your vessel upon arrival. Welcome to Earth. Navigation Officer Taiwan looked up from his console with wide eyes. Commander, the flight path they have sent us, it routes around dozens of objects in orbit around the third planet. What kind of objects? Stations, Taiwan replied, his voice filled with disbelief. Communication satellites, research platforms, defense installations. There are thousands of artificial objects in orbit around their world. Una 3 absorbed this information, adding it to the growing picture of this species called humans. They had not yet developed faster than light travel. Yet they had built an orbital civilization, complex enough to require traffic coordination. They had received a single alien transmission and decoded an entirely foreign language within hours, and they had responded to first contact not with fear or aggression or even celebration, but with calm professionalism, as if greeting travelers from the stars was simply another task to be managed. Set course for the provided coordinates, Una 3 commanded. All departments, prepare first contact protocols and cultural exchange materials. As the ship began its approach toward the blue and green world, Una 3 found herself studying the cascade of signals still flowing from the planet below, somewhere down there. A voice called Earth Control sat waiting to guide them in, treating their arrival as routine. The commander could not shake the feeling that her people had made a grave miscalculation. They had assumed they would be the ones introducing a primitive species to the wider galaxy. Instead, she suspected they were about to learn that humanity had been preparing for this moment far longer than anyone realized. The yellow star grew brighter in the view screen, and the Serenity of Distant Shores sailed onward toward whatever waited in the system the humans called Sol. 3 weeks had passed since the Kreth retreat, and the Serenity of Distant Shores had been repaired and resupplied for the journey. Home Commander Una 3 stood in the observation deck of an orbital station, watching the blue and green world rotate slowly below. She had spent those weeks studying, questioning, and trying to understand the civilization she had stumbled upon, the answers she had found would fill volumes. But one question remained unanswered. Liaison Officer Park, she said as Minji joined her at the viewport. I have one final question before my departure. Minji nodded. Her expression patient, she had spent these weeks answering questions, guiding tours, and facilitating exchanges between the Velthari delegation and human institutions. If she was tired of the endless queries, she did not show it. Ask whatever you wish. Commander, Una 3 chose her words carefully. Your species spent centuries knowing that the galaxy was dangerous. You intercepted transmissions, detected energy signatures, understood that species like the Kreth existed. Yet when we sent our hail, you answered immediately and without hesitation. She turned to face the human directly. Why would you reveal yourselves? Why would you risk everything you had built, just to answer a signal from strangers you had never met? Minji was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on Earth below. When she spoke, her voice carried weight that the commander had not heard before. May I show you something? They traveled by shuttle to a building that had not been part of any official tour. It was old by human standards, its architecture speaking of an earlier era. Inside, walls were covered with images and artifacts that told stories of tragedy and triumph. This is a memorial, Minji explained as they walked through halls filled with photographs of human faces. It commemorates a disaster from over a century ago, a city destroyed by natural catastrophe. Hundreds of thousands of lives lost. Una 3 studied the images, seeing the devastation, but also seeing something else: humans pulling survivors from rubble. Humans sharing food and water with strangers. Humans rebuilding from ashes. In the aftermath of that disaster, Minji continued, people from across our world sent help, not because they were required to, not because they would benefit, but simply because they heard that someone needed assistance. She stopped before a particular display, a communication console from an ancient era, preserved behind protective glass. This equipment was used to coordinate rescue efforts, Minji said. Operators worked around the clock, taking calls for help and directing resources to those in need. They called it the Emergency Control Center. It became the model for everything that followed. Earth control, Una 3 said, understanding beginning to dawn. The idea was simple, Minji confirmed. When someone calls for help, you answer. When someone needs assistance, you provide it. When someone is lost in the dark, you offer light. She met Una 3's eyes with an intensity that made the commander's scales ripple. We built Earth control because we learned in it. Cooperation was not weakness, it was survival. We learned that answering calls for help made us stronger, not weaker. We learned that the species that stands alone stands briefly. They returned to the shuttle in contemplative silence as they rose toward orbit. Minji spoke again. When your transmission reached us, we had a choice. We could ignore it, pretend we had not heard it, continue hiding in the hope that the galaxy would pass us by. She shook her head slowly, but that would have betrayed everything we have built, every system, every protocol, every principle that Earth control represents. We answer because answering is who we are, even knowing the risks. Una 3 pressed, especially knowing the risks, Minji replied. Because somewhere out there, we knew there would be species like the Kreth, but we also hoped there would be species like the Velthari species that reached out in peace, seeking connection rather than conquest. She smiled, and there was something profound in the expression. If we had stayed silent, we would have been safe from both, but we would have lost something more important in safety. We would have lost the chance to answer when someone called. The shuttle docked with the serenity of distant shores, and Una 3 gathered her delegation for final farewells. A crowd of humans had assembled in the station to see them off. Scientists, diplomats, soldiers, and ordinary citizens who had come to witness this moment of history. Among them stood Seoho Kang, A senior official who had coordinated the diplomatic exchanges, he approached Una 3 with a small package in his hands. "A gift," he said, offering it to her. "Something to remember us by." Inside the package was a communication device, similar to the ones used by Earth control operators. "It is tuned to our frequencies," COO explained. "If your people ever need assistance, if anyone ever needs assistance, all they have to do is call." Una 3 accepted the gift with hands that trembled slightly. "You would extend this offer to a species you have known for only weeks?" COO's expression was calm, his voice carrying the same steady assurance that characterized every interaction with Earth control. "We extend this offer to anyone who calls," he said simply. That is what we do. The farewells were completed, and the serenity of distant shores began its journey home as the blue and green world shrank in the viewports. Una 3 sat in her quarters composing the report that would determine her people's relationship with humanity. She wrote of their technology, their coordination systems, their defense capabilities. She wrote of their history, their conflicts, their remarkable journey from isolated nations to unified world. But most of all, she wrote of their philosophy, the simple, profound idea that when someone calls, you answer. They are not conquerors. She wrote, they are not prey, they are something the galaxy has not seen before, a species that built its entire civilization around the principle of responding to those who reach out. Do not mistake their openness for naivety. They know the dangers of the galaxy better than most, having prepared for centuries, and do not mistake their kindness for weakness. We saw how they fight when threatened, but most importantly, understand this. They answer because they choose to, because they believe that every signal deserves a response. Every call deserves acknowledgement. Every stranger might become a friend. I recommend full diplomatic engagement trade, cultural exchange, scientific cooperation. I believe humanity will prove to be the most valuable allies the Valkyrie have ever known. But be warned, they will also be the most challenging, because they will expect us to answer when others call, just as they do, and perhaps that is exactly what we need. She sealed the report and prepared for the long journey home. Months later, another species sent a tentative transmission toward a small yellow star in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. They had heard rumors of a world that answered signals, a civilization that welcomed strangers, a system called Earth Control that coordinated everything from disaster response to first contact. They were desperate. Their world facing a crisis they could not solve alone. They did not know if the rumors were true, did not know if anyone would hear their call, but they sent it anyway, a hail across the stars, hoping someone would respond. The answer came within hours. Earth Control acknowledges your transmission and welcomes you. The calm voice said, please state your situation and stand by for assistance. Coordination frequency monitored continuously. Help is on the way. And across the galaxy, one more species learned the truth that the Valkyrie had discovered. Earth was listening, Earth was ready, and Earth would always answer. The coordination center transformed around them with terrifying efficiency. One moment, the screens displayed evacuation routes and weather patterns. The next, the entire facility had shifted to defense posture. Military assets appearing on displays that had shown civilian traffic seconds before. And through it all, the calm voice of Earth Control never wavered. All defense sectors activating, an operator announced. Fleet elements reporting ready status across all orbital zones. Commander Una 3 stood frozen, watching as humanity prepared for war with the same methodical precision they had used to greet her ship. Liaison Officer Minji Park guided the Valkyrie delegation to an observation gallery overlooking the main command floor, where they could watch without interfering. You have a military fleet, Una 3 said, the words coming out as both statement and accusation. All our scans indicated your species had not yet achieved significant interplanetary capability. Minji's expression carried something that might have been embarrassment. We have developed certain capabilities that we chose not to broadcast, she admitted. The same signals that told us the galaxy was inhabited also told us it could be dangerous. On the main display, icons representing human vessels began moving into formation, hundreds of ships, ranging from small fighters to larger cruisers, emerging from hidden stations and classified facilities that the other scans had completely missed. But even as the fleet assembled, Una 3 could see the problem. The Kreth raiders numbered over 50 vessels, each one larger and more heavily armed than anything the humans could field. In a direct confrontation of firepower, Earth would lose. Your ships are outmatched, she said. Not as criticism, but as simple observation. The Kreth possess superior weapons, stronger shields, and more experienced crews. Yes, Minji agreed, her voice steady. They do. Then how do you intend to fight them? The human liaison turned to face her, and there was something ancient and fierce burning in her dark eyes. We intend to fight them together. The Kreth fleet decelerated as it entered the inner system, and Una 3 could imagine the confusion on their command bridges. They had expected to find a primitive world, defenseless against their advanced technology. Instead, they found themselves facing an organized defense fleet that had been waiting for them. Communications officer Jinho translated the Kreth transmissions as they were intercepted by Earth Control. They are demanding immediate surrender, he reported. Standard Kreth protocol: surrender and submit to harvest, or be destroyed. The response from Earth Control was broadcast across all frequencies, ensuring every ship in the system could hear it. Kreth vessels, this is Earth Control. You have entered protected space. Leave immediately, or we will consider your presence an act of war. This is your only warning. Laughter crackled across the intercepted Kreth channels. They did not believe the humans could stop them. Perhaps they were right about that. But as Una 3 watched the human fleet deploy, she began to understand that the Kreth had made a critical miscalculation. The human ships did not move like a traditional military force. There were no command vessels giving orders, no hierarchy of authority that could be targeted and destroyed. Instead, every ship seemed to move with independent purpose, while somehow remaining perfectly coordinated with every other vessel. What are they doing? Myra asked, her scientific mind trying to process the patterns she was seeing. Minji answered without taking her eyes from the display. Earth Control is coordinating the defense, but not commanding it. Every captain, every pilot, every crew member knows their role and trusts that everyone else knows theirs. The Kreth fleet attacked with overwhelming force, their weapons blazing toward the human positions, and the humans responded not with a wall of resistance, but with flowing adaptation ships that should have been destroyed, or simply not where the weapons struck. Formations that appeared solid dissolved into scattered elements that reformed elsewhere. The defense moved like water around stones, never meeting the Kreth strength directly, but constantly probing for weaknesses. They are using their coordination as a weapon, Una 3 realized, watching a group of human fighters lead a Kreth cruiser into a crossfire from ships it had not even noticed. The Kreth cannot predict their movements because there is no central command to analyze. The battle continued for hours. The Kreth possessed superior firepower, but they could not bring that firepower to bear against an enemy that refused to fight conventionally. Human ships darted through their formations, disrupting their coordination and forcing them to divide their attention. Every time the Kreth committed to an attack, the humans were already moving elsewhere, and through it all, the voice of Earth Control provided constant updates, not orders, but information. Ship positions, damage reports, ammunition status, and tactical options were shared freely across the entire fleet. Every captain knew exactly what every other captain Knew every decision was made with complete awareness of the overall situation Kreth flagship is attempting to break through the planetary orbit, an operator announced. The main display showed the largest Kreth vessel accelerating toward Earth, its weapons carving a path through the human defenders. Several human ships moved to intercept, but they were too small, too weak to stop the massive warship on their own. All vessels in sectors 7 through 12. Execute pattern Omega. Earth Control transmitted Una 3 did not understand what the pattern meant, but she watched as dozens of human ships suddenly changed course. They were not trying to stop the flagship. They were hurting it. The Kreth commander, focused on reaching Earth, did not notice until it was too late. The flagship emerged from its attack, run directly into the path of an asteroid that human tugs had been quietly repositioning. For the past 3 hours, the collision was not catastrophic, but it was enough. The flagship's shields failed. Its engines sputtered, and before it could recover, a swarm of human fighters descended upon it with surgical precision. Kreth flagship disabled, an operator reported. Enemy fleet is breaking formation without their command ship. The Kreth raiders lost their coordination. Individual vessels began retreating. No longer confident in their superiority, the human fleet did not pursue. Instead, Earth Control broadcast one final message. Kreth vessels, this is Earth Control. Your flagship has been disabled and will be returned to you as a gesture of good faith. Leave this system now and do not return. Is not a target. Earth is not prey. Earth answers those who call in peace and defends against those who come in war. This is your final warning. The Kreth fled, not because they had been utterly defeated, but because they had learned something that would spread throughout their networks and eventually across the galaxy. Earth was not defenseless. Earth was not alone. Earth was a world that had spent centuries preparing for this moment, building systems that could coordinate millions of individuals into a single unified response. And at the center of those systems sat Earth Control, calm, patient, and ready as the last Kreth ship vanished into the darkness between stars. Una 3 turned to Minji with new understanding in her eyes. You never called for help, she said. You faced a galactic-level threat and handled it yourselves. Minji nodded slowly, exhaustion finally showing in her features. We did not know if anyone would answer, she admitted. And even if they did, help would have arrived too late, so we built systems that could protect us without external assistance. But you answered our hail. Una 3 pressed. You welcomed us. You shared your knowledge. You trusted us with information about your defenses. Why would you do that while knowing such threats existed? The human liaison smiled, and despite the weariness, there was warmth in it, because that is what Earth Control does, she said simply. We answer. The shuttle descended through layers of white cloud, and Commander Una 3 gripped the armrests of her seat as the gravity of Earth pressed against her body, even with the compensators built into her environmental suit. The weight of this world was oppressive. Beside her, Science Officer Myra was breathing heavily through her respiratory filters, and Communications Officer Jinho had gone pale beneath his scales. Earth's gravity is significantly higher than Velthari standard, Liaison Officer Minji Park explained, her voice carrying notes of concern. The suit should help, but please inform me immediately if any of you experience distress. Una 3 nodded, saving her breath for the effort of simply existing on this heavy world. She had studied the data on human homeworlds during the journey here, but numbers on a screen could not prepare her for the reality. Earth was classified as a death world, a planet where the conditions exceeded safe parameters for most galactic species. The gravity could crush, the atmosphere could poison, the radiation from the yellow sun could burn, and the native life had evolved to compete in this brutal environment. Humans had not merely survived here, They had thrived. The shuttle touched down on a landing pad surrounded by towering structures of glass and metal beyond the buildings. Una 3 could see vegetation in vibrant shades of green, and above it all stretched a sky of brilliant blue that seemed to go on forever. "Welcome to Earth," Minji said. And despite everything, there was genuine pride in her voice. They emerged from the shuttle into chaos. The noise struck first a constant rumble of machinery and voices and movement that seemed to come from every direction. Then came the smells. Even through the filters, organic compounds and chemical traces, and something indefinable that spoke of life in overwhelming abundance. Humans moved everywhere, walking with purposeful strides that covered ground at impressive speed. Vehicles hummed along designated pathways. Aircraft traced lines across the sky, and through it all, Una 3 could see the evidence of Earth control display screens showing real-time data, communication nodes positioned at regular intervals, and personnel wearing coordinated uniforms who directed the flow of activity with practiced gestures. "This is the primary coordination center for this region," Minji explained as she led them into one of the larger buildings. "From here, Earth control manages transportation, emergency services, resource distribution, and communication for approximately 50 million humans. 50 million, one building, one regional center among many." Myra had recovered enough to begin scanning with her portable instruments, and her readings only added to the sense of scale. "The data traffic through this facility alone exceeds our entire homeworld's communication network," she reported, her voice carrying disbelief inside the coordination center. Dozens of humans sat at stations arranged in concentric rings, each focused on streams of data that flowed across their screens. At the center of the room, a massive three-dimensional display showed the region in real time. Every vehicle, every aircraft, every active communication channel represented by points of light, and the whole system moved without pause, processing information and making decisions at speeds that should have been impossible without direct neural linking. "How do they manage this?" Jinho asked, watching a human operator switch between multiple data streams while simultaneously speaking into a communication device. "They do not appear to have neural interface technology. How can individual minds process this much information?" Minji considered the question carefully before answering. "We train for it," she said. "From childhood, humans learn to manage multiple streams of information. It is simply part of how we exist in a complex world." She gestured toward the operators. "These individuals have spent years developing their skills, but the real secret is not individual capability. It is trust. Trust. Every person in this room trusts that every other person is doing their job correctly," Minji explained. "No single operator can manage the entire system, but together, each handling their piece, they create something greater than any of them could achieve alone." Una 3 studied the humans at their stations, seeing not just workers, but nodes in a vast network of cooperation. Each trusted the others to maintain their portion of the system. Each contributed their small piece to the greater whole, and somehow, without hive mind connections or neural linking or any of the technologies the Velthari used to achieve coordination, humans had built a system that rivaled anything in the known galaxy. An alert tone sounded, and the energy in the room shifted immediately. Operators leaned forward, their focus sharpening. The central display zoomed to show a section of the planet where swirling clouds had organized into a massive spiral pattern. "Typhoon alert," Minji said, her voice growing serious. "A major storm system is approaching a coastal population center, approximately 8 million people in the impact zone." Una 3 watched as Earth Control responded to the crisis within seconds. Evacuation routes appeared on the display. Transportation assets began repositioning communication channels, open to emergency services across the affected region, and through it all, the calm voices of the operators continued their work. coordinating the response with the same efficiency they had used to guide the Valkyrie ship into orbit. "How long until the storm arrives?" Mira asked. 14 hours, Minji replied. "Enough time to evacuate the most vulnerable populations and position emergency response teams. 14 hours to move millions of people on the Valkyrie homeworld? Such an evacuation would require military intervention, mandatory compliance orders, and probably result in significant casualties, despite every effort. But the humans approached it as a logistics problem, another set of variables to be managed by their coordination systems. Will people comply with the evacuation orders?" Una 3 asked. Minji's expression shifted to something the commander did not quite understand. "Most will," she said. "Some will choose to stay. It is their right. But Earth Control will provide them with resources and information to make that choice safely." "You allow them to refuse evacuation?" "We allow them to make their own decisions," Minji corrected gently. "Earth Control serves the population. We do not rule them. Every human remains free to accept or reject our assistance." The concept was difficult to process. The Valkyrie Coordination Authority would never allow individuals to endanger themselves through personal choice during an emergency. But as Una 3 watched the evacuation unfold on the display, she saw something remarkable. People were moving, not because they were forced to, but because they trusted the system to guide them to safety. Vehicles flowed along the designated routes. Shelters activated and began receiving arrivals, and the steady voice of Earth Control accompanied every step, providing information and assistance to anyone who requested it. "Commander," Jinho said quietly, drawing her attention to his portable scanner, "I am detecting an unusual energy signature from the outer system." Una 3 took the device and studied the readings. Multiple contacts, moving at high speed on an intercept course with the inner planets. The energy signatures did not match Valkyrie designs. "Minji," Una 3 said, keeping her voice calm despite the sudden cold that had settled in her stomach. "We may have a problem." The human liaison looked at the scanner, and for the first time since they had met, her professional composure cracked. "Earth Control," she said into her communication device. "Priority alert from Valkyrie delegation. Unknown contacts detected in outer system." The response came immediately. "Confirmed tracking multiple unidentified vessels on approach. Vector signatures match known Kreth radar profiles." Kreth, even in the distant reaches of Valkyrie space. That name was known and feared. Slavers, pirates, harvesters of pre-space flight worlds. The Kreth raided civilizations that could not defend themselves and vanished. The 4 galactic authorities could respond, and now they were heading for Earth. "How long until they arrive?" Una 3 demanded. The voice of Earth Control answered with the same calm professionalism it had used to coordinate storm evacuations and spacecraft traffic. "Approximately 18 hours. We must contact my government immediately," Una 3 said. "Request military assistance." Minji shook her head, her expression grim but not panicked. "Your nearest military forces are weeks away," she said. "There is no time." "Then what will you do?" The human liaison met her eyes, and in that gaze, Una 3 saw something that made her scales ripple with an emotion she could not name. "Earth Control will handle it." The approach to Earth took 6 standard hours, and every minute revealed new wonders that left the Valkyrie crew struggling to maintain their composure. Commander Una 3 had ordered all observation stations manned, and the data flowing into the ship's computers painted a picture of a civilization far more advanced than anyone had anticipated. "Commander," Navigation Officer Taiwan reported, his voice tight with controlled amazement, "I am counting over 12,000 artificial objects in orbit around the planet." 12,000. The Valkyrie homeworld, with all its centuries of spacefaring history, maintained perhaps 3,000 orbital installations, and these humans had not yet discovered faster-than-light travel. the coordination required to manage that many objects without collisions. Science Officer Mira murmured, more to herself than anyone else. The mathematical precision alone would require. She trailed off, unable to complete the thought. The calm voice of Earth Control guided them through the maze of satellites and stations with perfect accuracy. Every course correction was provided exactly when needed. Every potential conflict with other vessels was anticipated and avoided. The system operated with the precision of a living organism, countless parts moving in harmony. Valkyrie vessel, you are approaching final orbit insertion, Earth Control announced. Please reduce velocity to station-keeping speed and prepare for liaison shuttle approach. Confirmed. Earth Control. Communications Officer Jinho responded. Having adopted the human's efficient communication style, the serenity of distant shores settled into a stable orbit, and for the first time, the crew could see Earth clearly. Through the viewports, the planet was beautiful in a terrifying way. Swirls of white clouds moved across blue oceans and green-brown land masses, but it was the signs of civilization that drew every eye. Lights glittering on the night side, massive structures visible even from orbit, ships moving constantly between surface and sky. Shuttle on approach, Taiwan announced. A small vessel emerged from the organized chaos below, climbing toward them with confident grace, unlike Valkyrie ships, which favored smooth curves and organic shapes. The human shuttle was angular and purposeful, every line speaking of function over form. They are requesting permission to dock at our secondary airlock. Jinho reported. Yuna 3 nodded her approval, and within minutes the shuttle had connected to their vessel with surprising gentleness. The commander gathered her senior officers and made her way to the airlock. Unsure what to expect from their first face-to-face meeting with an alien species, the airlock cycled open to reveal a single human female standing at attention. She was shorter than Yuna 3 had expected, with black hair pulled back from a face that seemed designed for expressing emotion. Her uniform was crisp and professional, marked with symbols the Valkyrie did not yet understand. Commander Yuna 3, the human said, her pronunciation of the Valkyrie name surprisingly accurate. I am Liaison Officer Minji Park, assigned by Earth Control to facilitate your visit and ensure your needs are met. She extended one hand, palm facing sideways. Yuna 3 recognized the gesture from the cultural data Jinho had managed to extract from human broadcasts. A greeting ritual involving the clasping of hands. She reached out and completed the gesture. Noting the warmth of human skin and the firm confidence of the grip, we are honored by your welcome, Yuna 3 replied. I must confess that we did not expect such efficiency. Minji's face shifted into an expression the commander would later learn was called a smile. Earth Control exists to manage complexity, Minji explained. Your arrival was simply another variable to be integrated into our systems. She reached into a bag at her side and withdrew a collection of materials. This is your welcome packet, she continued. It contains translation guides, cultural primers, dietary information, and medical protocols in case any of your crew require assistance. Myra accepted the packet, her scientific curiosity overwhelming her caution. You prepared all of this in the time since we first contacted you? We have been preparing for this moment for over a century, Minji replied. Your arrival simply gave us a specific species to customize our materials for. The words hung in the air. A century of preparation, while the Valkyrie and other galactic species had assumed this region of space was empty. Humanity had been watching, listening, and preparing. Please, Minji continued, gesturing toward the ship's interior. May I come aboard properly? I have been assigned to remain with your vessel for the duration of your visit. Yuna 3 led the way to the ship's main conference room, where Minji took a seat and began explaining the arrangements that had been made. Every word she spoke added to the Commander's growing sense of unease. Accommodations had been prepared on the surface and in orbital stations, modified to match Velthary atmospheric and gravitational preferences. Cultural exchange programs had been drafted. Scientific collaboration frameworks had been outlined, all of it waiting, ready to be implemented the moment visitors arrived. How is this possible? Una 3 finally asked. Your species has not yet achieved faster than light travel. How could you have known to prepare for galactic contact? Minji's expression grew thoughtful. We knew we were not alone, she said simply. Our astronomers detected signs of artificial activity in distant star systems. Decades ago, energy signatures that could only come from advanced civilizations. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. We also intercepted transmissions, fragments of communications from species like yours. Too distant to decode fully, but clear enough to confirm that intelligent life existed beyond our world. And you chose to prepare rather than hide. Mira observed. Hiding was never a realistic option. Minji replied, eventually, someone would come, whether as friend or enemy. We could not know, so we decided to be ready for both. The human reached into her bag again and withdrew a small device. This contains a copy of our cultural database, she said. Art, music, history, science, philosophy, everything we could compile about our species and our world. Jinho accepted the device with hands that trembled slightly. You are simply giving this to us? Knowledge shared is knowledge multiplied, Minji said. One of our early philosophers said something similar many centuries ago. We have tried to build our society around that principle. The tour of Earth began the following. Minji guided them through orbital stations where thousands of humans worked in perfect coordination. She showed them communication hubs where Earth control managed not just space, traffic, but weather monitoring, disaster response, and resource distribution across the entire planet. Everywhere they went, the Velthary witnessed the same phenomenon: humans of different appearances and backgrounds, working together with seamless efficiency. How do you maintain such unity? Una 3 asked during a visit to a station overlooking the planet. Your species appears to have significant physical variation on many worlds. Such differences lead to conflict. Minji's smile faded slightly, replaced by something more complex. We had conflicts, she admitted. Many of them, spanning most of our history, wars over resources, territory, ideology. She gestured toward the planet below. But we learned slowly, painfully, that cooperation was the only path to survival, not just as nations or cultures, but as a species. Earth control, Una 3 said. Understanding beginning to dawn. Earth control was the result, Minji confirmed. A system built to coordinate our efforts and amplify our cooperation, not to rule, but to serve. The commander stared at the blue and green world below, seeing it with new eyes. Humanity had not merely survived their internal conflicts, they had transformed them into the foundation of something greater. And now, that something stood ready to greet the stars. We have much to learn from each other, Una 3 said quietly. Minji's smile returned, warm and genuine. That is exactly what we were hoping you would say.